From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up on AgDay, a family dealing with an unthinkable loss finds amazing support in their farming community.
It's overwhelming. It's everybody wants to help, and this is how they can help.
Another powerful winter storm is continuing its track east. The AgDay weather team has an update. The coronavirus continuing to grow in China, and with it concerns about whether China will be able to fulfill its trade promises. Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. As China works to contain the spread of a deadly new virus, Bloomberg's reporting Chinese officials are looking for flexibility when it comes to promises to buy U.S. product under the Phase 1 trade deal. Trade deal is scheduled to go into effect later this month. It does contain a clause that says the two sides will consult, quote, in the event that a natural disaster or other unforeseeable event, end quote. Bloomberg saying it's not known if China has made a request for the consultation as of yet, but quoting sources as saying officials will at some point. But China's foreign ministry had harsh words for the U.S. after it imposed travel restrictions to China due to the coronavirus, calling it an overreaction. Other countries followed suit, including Australia and New Zealand. And as the death toll mounts, the Shanghai stock market tanked 7.7% on Monday, the first day back for trading from the Lunar New Year holiday. It marks the biggest one-day drop since August of 2015. We'll have more on commodity market reaction coming up. And breaking news, USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue announcing that the third round of trade aid payments is on the way. Perdue announcing that third and final tranche of the 2019 Market Facilitation Program payments will begin showing up in farmers' bank accounts by the end of the week. Perdue saying, quote, "It's been a great start to 2020 for American agriculture with the signing of the historic Phase 1 deal with China and the signing of USMCA. While these agreements are welcome news, we must not forget that 2019 was a tough year for farmers as they were the tip of the spear when it came to unfair trade retaliation," end quote. Last year, the president authorized the USDA to provide up to $16 billion to producers following the trade war with China. The United Kingdom is now officially out of the European Union, and that means the UK must now strike individual trade deals with several nations formerly covered by the all-encompassing trade deal negotiated by the EU. One of those countries, the United States, but the U.S. ambassador sounding optimistic after Prime Minister Boris Johnson gave an address to the UK over the weekend.
I think deals always go better when there are timelines. So if you're willing to set a timeline, which he did, by the end of the year, I think it's completely feasible.
You think it could happen by the end of the year?
Absolutely.
No doubt trade, including the Phase 1 trade deal with China and the new U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, will be part of President Trump's State of the Union speech, which he is scheduled to give tonight. In the primetime speech, we are told the president will focus on prosperity and issues affecting America's working families. A senior administration official telling reporters President Trump's remarks will, quote, lay out a vision of relentless optimism, and there will be a farm presence at the speech. Democratic U.S. Representative Jimmy Panetta of California, whose district includes Salinas and other fresh produce growing areas, has invited a farm worker as his guest to hear the address. His name is Pablo Martinez, and he worked in Monterey County fields for 16 years, harvesting grapes, lettuce, strawberries, broccoli, and other produce. Now, he is the president of the Dreamers in Action Club at Monterey Peninsula College, where he graduated last year. Panetta is one of the sponsors of the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, which was introduced with bipartisan support in the House. And Wisconsin Senator Tammy Baldwin has invited Les Danielson, a dairy and grain farmer from Wisconsin, to be her guest. John Deere has been found responsible in a civil suit follows the death of a 38-year-old man from Stillwater, Oklahoma. The Stillwater News Press reporting the man's widow was awarded $5 million by a jury. James Beal died in May of 2014 when the tractor he was driving rolled over and he was trapped underneath. The case involving John Deere's 3038E compact utility tractor. It had a 305 front loader. Beal's wife claiming in her suit that the tractor was unsafe and was not properly configured by the factory or the dealership that sold it. Beal's attorneys claiming Deere's manufacturing failed to add additional weight to the rear of the tractor to counterbalance the front end loader, also claiming it wasn't added by the dealership. Now, Deere countering by saying that the tractor was not defective and suggesting Beal may have not been wearing a seatbelt. The newspaper reporting the jury deliberated for 27 minutes before coming to a decision. A rough start to the week in Wyoming, a winter storm pushing through the state on Monday. These pictures provided by the Wyoming Department of Transportation of I-25 east of Casper. Black ice, blowing snow, forcing officials to close 125 miles of the interstate for a time. Several other highways and roads in the state also affected. The Casper Police Department declaring a snow day on Monday, meaning they wouldn't be able to respond to minor crashes. And now that storm is marching east. Meteorologist Cindy Clausen is tracking it. She joins us now. Cindy.
Yeah, Clinton, it was definitely a nasty time for much of Wyoming, and even into Colorado we were seeing that snow. Let's take a look here, and you can see just the snow accumulation through this morning. This is an estimate, but you can see many areas 8 to 12 and even over a foot of snow. And of course there was that ice in spots as well, so that was really making for a mess. And as you mentioned, the storm is moving to the east. It's kind of moving also to the south, so we're going to be watching some of that moving into the central plains, but the low itself moving further to the south, and eventually we're going to see things picking up in the southern plains. We're going to watch the track of that storm as it gets into the middle and latter part of the week and starts moving into the Corn Belt and into the Great Lakes area. Well, of course, it's calving season, and this little one is really loving barn life right now. A rancher in Idaho sharing this video on Twitter. Now, this little guy thinking he's being helpful in the barn with getting chores done. Just look at him following her wherever she goes. The cow named Drax is on the bottle right now until a mama cow steps in to feed him. Reminds me a lot about my dog following me with the vacuum cleaner. Well, stick around. I'm going to have your national forecast coming up. Clinton.
Talk of a possible breakthrough regarding a vaccine for African swine fever is continuing to make headlines. We first told you last week the American Society for Microbiology reporting a vaccine being tested right now is being shown to be 100% effective against the virus. The research being carried out at Plum Island Animal Disease Center in New York with USDA. Farm Journal's Tyne Morgan asking USDA Undersecretary Greg Eibach about the promising vaccine at Top Producer Summit in Chicago last week.
ARS continues to have research ongoing on a number of diseases. ASF has definitely come to the front and center of those discussions. There is a new emerging technology that we think has some great promise, but we still have to go through the commercialization process as well as finish up some of the research. The research that's been done so far is only on a small number of hogs. It's very promising, but we have to expand those research trials to be able to guarantee that we have something that we can move to commercialization with.
Researchers say the vaccine they are testing offers complete protection against the current strain producing outbreaks throughout Eastern Europe and Asia. Another threat right now, this time in Somalia. The concern is over locusts. That country's Minister of Agriculture saying the locust swarm across eastern Africa is now posing a major threat to Somalia's fragile food security situation. And there are concerns the situation might not be brought under control before harvest starts in April. Somalia is the first country to declare an emergency, but the locusts are also a problem in Ethiopia and Kenya. The UN saying the swarms are the largest in Somalia in 25 years. It's reported locusts can travel over 90 miles a day, and each adult can eat its own weight in food every day. And we're getting ready for a big event for the cattle industry. The annual Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA Trade Show starts tomorrow. The annual 3-day convention in San Antonio, Texas draws thousands of producers and industry movers from across the country. Leaders will decide on their priorities over the next year and what they accomplished in the past year. AgDay national reporter Betsy Gibbon will be there talking to ranchers and other officials. Look for her reports coming up later this week, and make sure you follow us on social media as we keep you posted on the convention. Still ahead, we dive into the dairy market and what this year could bring. And later, a family hit by great loss, a farming community coming together to help in the harvest. Amazing response ahead in the country. The market continuing to feel the impact of the coronavirus, but soybeans saw a small recovery on Monday. We dive into the numbers on the floor of the CME.
Today in the grain market, the soybeans did slide yet again. I think the coronavirus is still affecting all the markets really across the board. I think futures now are lower for the soybeans 10 days in a row and 12 out of 13. I think most traders have really moved to the sidelines right now because of the uncertainty, and until the coronavirus is out of the headlines, it seems like that we're going to see these markets bounce around quite a bit. Even though there was actually some decent news for soybeans that we did get a pretty good sale, it really made the market rally just slightly and then kind of gave it all right back. Corn was lower as well. It kind of broke out of the current channel it's in to the downside. There was some concerns that as China was coming out of its new year that there was going to be a big washout. Now it didn't completely happen, but the market is lower. Wheat was also fell. The correction is pretty much in full swing right now. The objective really is the 530 number. It's very possible we can actually even go through that. The markets are just looking now to the WASDE report that's coming up, but based on what we see, not much really is expected.
We're joined by Naomi Bloom, Total Farm Marketing, our guest today. Let's talk about the dairy industry. 2020, we're hoping to be a better year. Is that going to be the case?
We're still balancing the bigger supplies overall along with the demand pace. And so demand right now in the United States continues to be kind of about the same, and what we're hoping for is continued export market increase, and that'll be, of course, dependent on phase one. But the phase one deal is supposed to show an increase in demand for powder, for milk powder, and for whey powder. So that's really important to be aware of. And we're also hoping for, again, more cheese demand, because for most of the past of 2019, that's really what led the marketplace higher, was that increased cheese demand that we saw. And production levels, though, kind of switching back to that, it's small increases that we've seen, but kind of leveling off. We've got less cows producing more milk. But what I'm really going to be curious about is 2020 in terms of feed in Wisconsin.
Okay.
So here's what's happened in Wisconsin. We had a horrible hay crop. We barely had 4 cuttings of hay, and what we received was horrific. So then the producers who were planting corn, instead of being able to have some corn for silage and some corn for just corn feed, most all of it went to corn silage because they didn't have the hay crop that they thought of. So now we have parts of Wisconsin where we are feeding wheat to the dairy cow. And so from my understanding from my veterinarian friends who are tight in the industry, they say that the production for milk shouldn't go down, but it's going to affect the milk fat.
Interesting.
So that's going to be what's going to be most important to watch going forward. And we have corn basis levels in Wisconsin that are positive. So where I live on the eastern side of the state, usually the basis for corn is 30 cents under, 10 cents over right now. So we are short on corn, the cows are eating wheat, and we're going to see lower fat percentages coming in the production ahead. So the milk story I don't think is over, and if we can see the Chinese demand pick up, I think we're going to see higher prices ahead, but we need the demand to stay there first, of course.
All right, interesting stuff. Very good. Appreciate it. Thank you, Naomi. We'll be back with more Ag Day coming up in just a minute.
To discuss marketing strategies, call 800-334-9779 or visit stewartpeterson.com.
Meteorologist Cindy Clausen joining us here with a look at our national forecast. And Cindy, once again this week, another system marching across the middle of the country.
Yeah, exactly. So we're really watching what we were seeing in Wyoming, Colorado, that low moving to the south, but eventually is going to be bringing looks like what could be a fair amount of snow to the eastern part of the country. Well, you can see a lot of that action has been in parts of the Rockies. Well, this low is going to push off to the south. We'll see a fair amount of moisture along the front that's going to be draping all the way through the Tennessee Valley into the Ohio Valley, the low pushing off slowly into the northeast. But there's not a ton of movement over the next 24 hours of this front as it just sinks slowly to the south. The northern fringe of this will be in the form of ice and snow, and you can see that snow moving into parts of the central plains. Into the overnight hours we go, we start to pick up more moisture on the back side of that low, and look at that snow really start to blossom in parts of Texas and Oklahoma. We've got rain along the front, and we're going to see some snow and icy conditions on the north side of this system as you get into the northeastern United States. Fairly quiet in the north central United States, but we still have rain and higher elevation snow in the northwest. As we head into your Wednesday, we're going to be seeing that low starting to move up to the north. Look for that snow in some of those same areas that have been getting hit over the past several several weeks. Missouri, parts of Illinois, even into Oklahoma. Lots of rain, though, for the central parts of the Gulf Coast states. As far as how much rain, it hasn't been a whole lot in the past 24 hours, but you add on the next 24 hours, you really see that rain blossoming here, parts of the Tennessee and Ohio Valley, and it picks up more in the central Gulf Coast states, and we certainly still see a lot of moisture in the Pacific Northwest. Snowfall's mostly over the past 24 hours been in Colorado and into Wyoming. We watch that extend into the Central Plains and into the Southern Plains, and there's that low that's starting to move up to the north, starting to affect parts of the Corn Belt and eventually up towards the Great Lakes region. Temperature-wise, big difference. Check this out. 16 in Minneapolis, but we're in the 80s in southern Texas. That is a big difference north to south. And it's a big difference on either side of the front here, too. This afternoon, we're looking at temperatures in the 60s in Dallas, 62, but only 38 in Tulsa. So a really huge difference in those temperatures on either side of that front. And that continues into tonight as well. We're going to see temperatures getting down to the single digits towards Denver, also the north central United States, while it's really warm still in the southeastern part of the country. Let's look at that jet stream. Big trough in the west. We're going to see that stormy weather on the front side of that. Watch as this trough kind of moves across the country as we get through this week. So some cooler air coming down into play with that stormy weather on the front edge of it. Now that really cold air starts to retreat to the north, but we see another trough developing as we get into the early part of next week in the western United States. That's a look at your national forecast. Now let's check out the weather where you live. Quartzsite, Arizona, sunny and breezy for you today, but chilly morning, a high of 54 degrees. Winter, South Dakota, clouds early but gradual clearing through the day with a high of 27. McMinnville, Tennessee, showers likely with a high of 63.
The owner of a dairy now facing federal fraud charges, plus an update on the possible merger between two giants in the dairy industry. Next. We're learning more about the possible merger between Dairy Farmers of America and Deere Foods. The Wall Street Journal reporting the Department of Justice is looking into the potential for antitrust issues. Now a spokesperson with Dairy Farmers of America is commenting. Monica Massey is the Executive Vice President and Chief of Staff for DFA. She tells Farm Journal's Milk, quote, "I think the Department of Justice has a job to do and we want to be transparent. We think it's premature because there is no deal yet. But Department of Justice is starting to look into it. That's their job, and of course, we will cooperate with them," end quote. Massey couldn't comment on the deal while it's in negotiations, but she said they are looking for a deal that's fair for all. Dairy Farmers of America is the largest U.S. dairy cooperative, and Deere Foods is the biggest milk processor. Deere Foods filed for bankruptcy back in November. The Associated Press reports the owner of an award-winning organic dairy in Pennsylvania is now accused of taking nearly $60 million from investors. Trickling Springs Creamery in Chambersburg closed its doors last fall after 18 years in business. It produced milk, cream, butter, ice cream, yogurt, and cheese. Federal prosecutors say Philip Reel was the majority owner of the creamery. In court documents, they say Reel ran a long-running fraud scheme that preyed on hundreds of Amish and Mennonite investors. He was charged last week with securities and wire fraud. He apologized in a letter to investors. From a devastating loss comes amazing help. A one farming community is stepping up to assist a family farm hit by fire. Next.
America's Conservation Ag Movement is brought to you by these great foundational partners, empowering resilient and sustainable agriculture.
Farm community is helping a family devastated by a tragic house fire where one young boy died and 3 family members were burned. Neighbors are coming together to harvest a corn crop covered in snow near the small town of McCluskey, North Dakota. Morgan Bent reports.
Farmers are working to clear fields in McCluskey, but it's not their own crop they're combining.
People want to help, and the immediate needs they saw was, harvesting this corn.
Several weeks ago, Tim Erdman lost his grandnephew in a house fire. The child's parents and sister suffered severe burns as well.
Well, I know it affected everybody in the community when something like that happens.
The entire community has come together to get the corn out of this field, bringing over 20 semis, about 7 combines, and more than 30 people to really help the family that has been affected by this tragedy.
This is one thing about our community is really good. When an awful thing like this would happen, that we just get together and do whatever we can.
Workers are helping to harvest 900 acres of corn in 2 days.
It's overwhelming. Everybody wants to help, and this is how they can help.
The grain elevator is also chipping in. Family members say workers have cleared out a wet grain bin so they have a place to store the harvest. In McCluskey, I'm Morgan Bent for your news leader.
All right, thanks Morgan for sharing that story. That's all the time we have this morning. Sure glad you tuned in. It's been part of your day with us. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.